Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where everybody wants to know who won this fight. Yes, both weighing in at about $200 million. In this corner, we have Tenet. From Warner Brothers, wonder director Christopher Nolan, here to save movie theaters. And in the other corner, Mulan, the mouse maverick, here to unite the East and the West and shake up streaming. Well, after going 3 rounds, we can finally declare a winner, and that's Tenet. Woo! The crowd kind of goes wild. And that's because the real loser here is blockbuster movies in general during the pandemic, as there's clearly no good way, theatrical or streaming, for a cost to release, and you have to release it for a cost or else you're certainly not going to make your money back. But there's just no good way to release these movies. Like, people want to see them, but there's no way to release them and actually make any money, and in some cases you lose a lot of money, which we're gonna break down right now. I'm curious, what would you do? Share your thoughts now, but then also again at the end of this video when you've heard some harsh truths. All right, so Tenet in its third weekend pulled in just 4.7 million. Warner Brothers is still hiding the hourly numbers, but they had to announce that it made 4.7 million this weekend, bringing its domestic total in 3 weeks to 36.1, about half of what Nolan movies usually open with in their first weekend, and this is after 3 weekends. Sure, the trades are touting a strong Japan, but in reality, that's just another $4.3 million. That's why America and China are so important, because they're the only ones who can deliver really big chunks of change. We're going to talk about China. And after 4 weeks, because remember, Tenet opened overseas first, about 4 weeks, the global total is 250.1 million. There's only one major market now left, and that's Brazil, where it opens this coming weekend. But at this rate, it's likely only to get to 300 million, which is what the industry had expected going in. However, Warner Brothers is holding out hope that Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco will reopen theaters soon, even though there's been no such discussion from state and local governments that they will. But still, the trades are saying that Warner Brothers is planning a big ad blitz for when those theaters do open. Like, you want to see Tenet now? So maybe they could get a little bit higher than the 300 million. I mean, we don't know specifically how much a city can deliver, although it looks like we might be able to find out. We're learning a lot of interesting things during this pandemic. That's a genuine silver lining, at least for us. Not so much for the studios. But speaking of big cities, I still continue to feel, living in one, that people who live in big cities will be more reluctant to head back to the multiplex than other areas. We have, public transportation, more people on there. There's more crowding. In other areas, you go from your car to the theater, back to your car. For instance, some of you might have seen this as well. Chains of stores have reported that while some of their other locations in other parts of the country have been able to somewhat return back to business, it's been really difficult in New York City. And in fact, a number of businesses have had to shutter or have stayed closed or shuttered permanently. So I don't know if the cities, when they come back online, if they're going to act like the theaters that are online currently are acting. Now, although, the trades did point out that, sure enough, the biggest theaters where Tenet was performing were in California, outside Los Angeles, like Orange County, which is a big no-masker zone. That did quite well there. And it did pretty well in Connecticut and New Jersey, the 2 states in the tri-state area, of course, the other being New York, where theaters are open. Now, as for Mulan's box office, because Disney opened it in countries that don't have Disney+, it's not doing so good. In its second weekend in China, where it was supposed to be a big moneymaker, well, don't worry, we're going to talk about that, the film plummeted 72%, bringing its 3-week worldwide total to a measly $57 million. But what about Mulan on Disney+? This was supposed to be the big play, right? We'll talk about Premier Access. There's chapter times as always down below, so you know what we're going to get to. But anyway, this past week, as you might have seen on the old Twitter, there were reports of a third-party guesstimate. It was the third party on top of a third party. So one third party released what they thought, the percentage of Disney Plus subscribers they felt paid to watch Mulan for $30. And then another third party said, well, then we think that Mulan blew Tenet out of the water with $270 million in its first 8 days. But yesterday, the first guesstimator took to Twitter to clarify, because that number was ridiculous, and the first party didn't want to be associated with it. I don't blame them. So Seven Park Data, who we've never heard of before, said that based on their third-party analysis, again with no corroboration from Disney, Disney has their investor day. It was just announced on October 7th. It's a Wednesday, so expect to get some numbers then. I think they'll release a number. The numbers are going to be bad. I have a number for you from my sources, but you might get them. They might announce another Premier Access title, so that could be another way to kind of determine how things worked out as well. And I think what movie it is will also be a big determinant as to how things went, or admittance, because again, I have a number for you. So anyway, Seven Park Data said that while they said that approximately 10% of Disney Plus subscribers streamed Mulan over the first 8 days for $30, by the way, they said that was compared to about 40% for Hamilton, which was available at no extra cost. That's quite a big difference. However, and they paid $100 million for Hamilton. All right, but still less than they paid for Mulan. All right, so anyway, Seven Park Data pointed out that this was 10% of U.S. subscribers who were active over that period. That's crazy. So that's how many people were using Disney Plus over the 8 days that they were looking at, and that doesn't include overseas subscribers to Disney Plus. And overall, Disney Plus has about 60 million subscribers. Maybe they got a couple more because of Mulan, but they're in that ballpark. So basically, Seven Park Data has no idea what that 10% is of. They're like 10% of some number. But they said if they were to make a guess as to revenue, they said it would be realistically between 62 and 93 million for the first 8 days, not as an opening weekend. Now, I just heard from my sources that I just heard this morning, that overall to date, Mulan has made about 90 million on Disney Plus. I'm not talking the first 8 days. I'm talking the first 3 weeks. That's so bad. Bringing Disney's total earnings so far to about 150 million. Oh, but Tenet still has one more blow to land even more so. It's like, stop kicking it, it's dead. But it's not. There's more to come. Because it is dead. But anyway, Mulan has effectively played its digital card. It's already out of the top 10 on trending on Disney Plus. And during the middle of the week, by the way, it totally disappeared from trending and then mysteriously popped up back into like number 15 or something. They didn't create a sale, so I wonder how that happened. But anyway, it's just trending. There's no numbers in front of them. But anyway, Tenet still has PVOD to go. That includes sales, digital sales, and rentals. Plus, going to HBO Max, down the line, the ancillary market of playing in hotels and airplanes, although who's going on to a hotel or on an airplane right now? But still, when all is said and done, theatrically and with the ancillary market, Tenet will be the clear winner. But like I said, there's no real winner here really at all, because the loser is the blockbuster movie during this pandemic. Because the break-even point for both Tenet and Mulan, interestingly enough, it's so crazy. It truly is a tale of two movies. They both have to hit about 500 million to break even. And Tenet will probably just hit that just after ancillary. So not even just with box office. At the end of its entire run, it will just probably hit that. Mulan will likely fall short. So Warner Brothers won't make any money, and Mulan and Disney is going to lose money. A lot of money! Let's talk about the colossal failure that is Mulan. And yet another blow to Mulan, while Tenet at least can hold its head high, is trying to save movie theaters. It went out valiantly. And simply being a victim of the pandemic, Mulan will go down as one of the biggest failures in Hollywood history. It's waves of failure rippling out across the globe, from Disney's headquarters in Burbank to the communist government in China. At least it's poetic. But anyway, as we've discussed before, Mulan is the first movie that Hollywood has made directly for Chinese audiences. But interestingly, with no Chinese filmmakers involved. Not even in an advisory capacity. But why would Disney do this? Because China is a movie market that can deliver shockingly big box office numbers, at least on paper. But usually they only do that for local fare, which I think is also the reason that on paper they look so good, because it's the home team. So far, the only Hollywood flicks to make that big money in China are Fast and Furious movies, they love those films, and Avengers Endgame, which is in fact the 4th highest grossing film in China of all time. And while Disney test marketed Mulan to death with Chinese audiences, who apparently wrote down no kissing, but failed to give Disney a heads up that the film was offensive to Chinese audiences and got obvious historical Chinese elements wrong, I'd be like, where was that on your form? God damn it. But Disney assumed that while they were working so hard to make Chinese audiences happy, they felt that Western audiences were all talk when they said that they were upset that there was no music or mushu in the movie. And at the end of the day, Western audiences would cave. Well, you know what? Even though Western audiences did come to love Blue Will Smith, he was a delight, they weren't bluffing when it came to Mulan. And that's because Disney, in an effort again to please China, but didn't please China, they violated their proven live action remake formula. The same, but more, right? The same story you know and love, but with extra layers. And also the wedding cake idea, where it's just so sumptuous and glamorous, you're just overwhelmed with awesomeness. And that's worked incredibly well in the past. Also, on top of its creative problems, Mulan is fraught with political controversy, all thanks to the Chinese government, which really, shivved Disney. First, they strong-armed star Liu Yifei in deciding with the brutal Hong Kong police against democratic protesters, and then, upon release of the film, it was revealed in the credits that Disney shot part of the movie in an area of China where they have concentration camps, and where China imprisons local Muslims for forced labor and often sterilizes them. How bad was the public relations fallout? It was so bad that the Chinese government itself turned on the movie and instructed all of its state-run media, which is pretty much all of its media, to either not mention Mulan or run negative coverage. So you guys have sent me some negative articles about Mulan from China, and I looked up the publications, and they were almost all Chinese government owned. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were behind some of the trolls on Chinese social media as well. Meanwhile, local film The 800, which again, the Chinese government, as we discussed before, had re-edited it into a propaganda piece, unseated Mulan as number 1 and has already hit $424 million, and it's just getting started over there, which means it will soon, at least on paper, be the highest grossing film of 2020. Uh-oh! The Hollywood-China relationship is about to get prickly. In the past, China's been careful not to, as I've discussed with you before, not to upset the house too much. But to have the number 1 movie of the year, Hollywood's going to be, I don't know, would Hollywood ask them to prove it? I mean, there's so much money in China, and even if, again, it's on paper, because studios only get 25% of that money. It's 50% of overall box office, and one of the reasons is because they only get 25% of the money from China. But anyway, even on paper, it helps with headlines to make the movie seem like a bigger deal. You can't get into the top 10 of all time anymore without China. So will anyone besides Judd Apatow really take a stand? Disney has 3 theme parks in the region, the latest just built in Shanghai, whose castle is in the opening credits of Mulan. Remember the Disney hierarchy of cash. It goes theme parks, television, and then movies. So they're not going to upset that apple cart or whatever fruit they like to eat in China. Now, what about Premier Access? Is it over before it even really got started? A lot of us thought this was a pretty darn good idea from a business perspective. Well, yes and no. I do believe Disney will want to test one more title, maybe Soul. I think they're going to want to do another title because this one is, I think, it's not a true test because it had so many controversial issues to it. And it was just a huge misfire. Everyone hated it. So it's really not a good barometer as to whether or not people are willing to go the Premier Access route. And again, Disney's doing that to circumvent iTunes and Amazon, etc., to make sure they keep most of the money for themselves instead of having to go through a third party. But anyway, we've discussed that. But anyway, what movie will they test it with? I don't think it's going to be a Black Widow because these numbers are so bad they stand to lose too much money. I think Soul is a better movie to test with. It's a Pixar original, so it probably wasn't going to make. It probably would come in around $600 million, and they'll still with these numbers. Well, I don't know. That's not true because the Tenet maybe. It's tough. It'd have to still make about $300 million for it to match what Soul probably would do in theaters. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, Soul still will be eligible for an Oscar because they changed the rules this year, and Disney's just going to want to get Soul out this year and not be responsible for giving any kids coronavirus by releasing it in theaters. So I think you'll see Soul go to Premier Access before you see Black Widow. I think they'll just shift those release dates yet again. But I believe that while the controversy surrounding Mulan was a genuine problem, there's also the economic factor. Nobody has released PVOD numbers since Trolls, which was the first out of the gate at the very beginning of the pandemic. Now, 7 months in, there's real economic hardship across the entire globe. And I believe people simply aren't willing to pay for content beyond what's already included in their streaming subscription prices. We started this pandemic with 2 big services and a lot of smaller ones, and 2 more have launched during the pandemic. There has never been so much content, just so much content available for a base subscription fee. I don't believe any studio will be able to charge extra for content during the pandemic. Again, they can grow their subscriber bases for these streaming services, but I think the upcharge, the upsell, just isn't going to work, which means Hollywood will have to sit on these blockbuster movies for about a year from now and rely on smaller films and streaming content until then. Now you might be like, Grace, they just can't let these movies sit on the shelf for so long. What are we going to do for a year? Well, on that note, maybe during the holidays, right, audiences will get so desperate for a big new movie that maybe Soul or say Wonder Woman 1984, because it's been just held for so long, I don't think it can handle another delay. They can go to streaming maybe at an extra cost. So let's see what happens. But I think for now, certainly over the next couple of months, there's just, you just can't release movies. There's just the numbers are so bad. There's just no financial path. Now, that's depressing. All right, so what's everyone streaming right now? Well, because it's getting a little light over there, except for Netflix, which just has so much content. So over on iTunes, despite its horribly low Rotten Tomatoes score, Antebellum was still fresh fare and debuted at number 1. But who knows how much money it actually made, because nobody releases those numbers. So that number 1 could be meaningless. Then a new trend is emerging where, after a tragic passing, most recently John Lewis and Chadwick Boseman, and now RBG, people remember them by checking out their documentaries, and in this case, an actual, and their films. This one being a film about RBG on iTunes. I think that's really lovely. And Netflix released 2 new series this Friday, Ratched and Jurassic World, Camp Cretaceous. Many of you have tweeted me about that, and both shot to the top. In fact, Ryan Murphy, one of you brought to my attention, tweeted out that Ratched is like the number 1 show in the entire world. So, people love to hate watch it, or some of you are actually really enjoying it. So I think that, he might not be delivering tomatoes to Netflix, but he's certainly delivering, well, is it cash? I mean, but he's keeping subscribers happy so they don't leave the service, and that's very valuable to Netflix. Then Devil All the Time, which came out on Wednesday, settled in at number 5. Away and Cobra Kai are also both still going very strong. Netflix is on fire. Finally on Disney Plus, where there's just a warm glow, there's some embers, but I think the fire's going to start up again soon, because sure enough, the new Mandalorian trailer and a bunch of Emmy wins already, they had some Emmys given away earlier this week, has inspired people to rewatch season 1 to get ready for season 2. Well, Once Upon a Time hit the streaming service and debuted in the top 10. As for this coming week, on Wednesday, Enola Holmes hits Netflix, which has made Wednesday their day for releasing movies, and then they release series for the weekend so you can binge. That's a pretty darn good strategy. Then on Friday, well, Netflix actually doesn't have a new series this one week. That's the overall strategy they're coming up with. But Amazon's American version of Utopia debuts, plus espionage thriller Tehran on Apple TV+. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what do you think of Tenet versus Mulan? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.